Hello, hello. We will be getting started in just a second. Thank you to everyone who is going to join us today for our conversation about grassroots activism. We have a great group of city leaders that we're going to hear from today, and I will bring them on in just a second. My name is Ebony Chappelle, and I'm Director of Programs and Communication for Leadership Indianapolis. Leadership Indianapolis is a civic leadership nonprofit that believes that leadership in our city is at its best when it's multicultural, multi generational, and collaborative. And today we are going to represent just that with our conversation about grassroots activism here in the city of Indianapolis. If you have any questions or comments that you want to share with our panelists, be sure to drop something in the comment box below, and we may populate your message on screen for us to respond and get into. But again, thank you all so much for tuning in. The past year and a half, I can't believe it's been that long, have been incredibly transformative on a lot of different levels. We have seen civil unrest across the world and right here in our own city. We've seen a lot of reckoning happening in systems and structures, and a lot of conversation around what it takes to make things more equitable for us now and also for everyone to come in the future. And there is not, I don't think there's a better way to get this started off than to talk with people who are boots on the ground, who are directly involved with supporting the community and helping to see these things come to fruition. So without further ado, I'm going to bring our guests onto the screen. Today we are talking with Sibeko Jawanza. Give us a wave, Sibeko. So, hailing from a family of community activists, Sebaco Jawanza is exceptionally acquainted with resident engagement, community development, relationship cultivation, and key stakeholder involvement. Sebaco presently serves as Director of Food Justice at Flanner House. And outside of his work at the Flanner House, he serves as mayoral appointee on the Food Advisory Council, founding board member of Vanguard Collegiate, which is a local school, vice president of the Exchange at the Indianapolis Urban League, board member and City County Council appointee of the Department of Public Works, and is a coordinator with the Indianapolis Kwanzaa Committee. Thank you for being here, Sebaco.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Absolutely. Up next, we are going to hear from Jessica Louise, who is here representing in a few different capacities. So, Jess, whose pronouns are they, them, she, is a community organizer with Indy 10 Black Lives Matter, Queering Indy, and the Louisville Community Bail Fund. Their vocation is animated by daring ideas that reshape the world through education, direct action, and restorative and transformative justice. Justice work empowers people to reclaim and recast their past, present, and future. They operate with the boldness of Harriet Tubman, the incisiveness of Audre Lorde, and the rigor of Asada Shakur, believing that collective power will carry us all to freedom. Thank you for being here, Jess.
Happy to be here, Ebony. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least is Sayra Campos. Since graduating from Broad Ripple High School, shout out to all our Rockets, in 2010, Sayra has been involved in several local and national grassroots immigrant led movements, including work with the Latino Youth Collective and the National Immigrant Youth Alliance. As a founding member of the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance in 2012, Sayra has experience in 2012. Sayra has experience in nonprofit and community leadership. She currently serves as treasurer for the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance, board member for the Midwest Immigration Fund Coalition. She is a member of Movimiento Cosecha Indiana, community ambassador for the Central Indiana Community Foundation, and works as a legal assistant at Munoz Legal. Thank you so much for being here, Sayra.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I just gave a little bit of your all's background, but Saida, I'll go ahead and start with you, and then Sibeko and just jump in where you feel comfortable. But talk to us about what your work looks like right now and some of the things that are going on with Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance for people that may not be familiar.
So yeah, as you mentioned, the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance was started in 2012, and at that time, there was a group of us students that were trying to navigate our journey through higher education, graduating high school, into college, and there was just a lack of resources and a lack of people in the education systems that were aware or knowledgeable about the issues that undocumented students face while trying to get into higher education, and also funding, right? At the time, as long as you were able to establish that you were a resident of the state of Indiana, you were eligible for in-state tuition. Unfortunately, in 2011, there was a law that passed, HB 1402, that took away that in-state tuition for undocumented students and pushed them into out-of-state tuition. So UYA has always been working toward fundraising so that we can continue to provide funding for undocumented students that want to continue into higher education. So we do provide scholarships yearly, 10 scholarships for students to continue on. And we've done a lot of Know Your Rights trainings throughout the state, in Richmond, in Frankfurt, up north, down south in Bloomington, in the Goshen area as well. And so that's a little bit of what UYA does. And currently, last year, we've collaborated with a few organizations to create a COVID relief fund for undocumented families, since undocumented families weren't eligible for any of the stimulus checks or a lot of the larger grants that were given out to help families financially. And so in collaboration with Cosecha and Proyecto Siembra, as well as currently now AIJ at IUPUI, and we were able to help fundraise around a little bit over $125,000 to help undocumented families economically.
That's good. That is awesome. Sibeko, Jess, please jump in and talk to us a little bit about your work as well.
So a lot of what kind of my bio talks about is the things that I was raised with. And so my work right now encompasses a nonprofit aspect of things, working through Flanner House, which, you know, if you haven't heard what we're doing over here, you should probably pay a little bit more attention because I haven't seen it in any other place. If you take what we're doing with our farm and with Cleo's Bodega, which is a grocery store and a cafe, and the new greenhouse that we're developing separately, then, you know, those are just some nice projects that are happening that are needed in the area. But if you're actually talking about making a difference in the lives of people that live in particularly this area and setting an example for the city, and look at what we're doing as a collective model, where the farm feeds the bodega, where the greenhouse feeds the bodega, as well as other things, you start talking about an ecosystem. You start talking about something that can spread further into the idea of a project and more into changing a lifestyle for a group of people or a community. And that's the best way that I can explain what's going on over at Flanner House. This past year and a half, well, I guess we can call it 2 years now, right? Like it's literally changed the model on what everything, how people work and how people move. But we ain't missed a beat. Like, our job was to help people any way we can, and that's what we did, and that's what we were doing. You know, the grocery store aspect of this, there's essential workers that work at grocery stores. So, you know, your brother was out there like handling business, trying to feed people and making sure that things were there, and trying to help anybody that needed it, opening up our doors for those who needed a safe haven after the, let's just say when communities spoke up for themselves last year, right? I hate the way that we actually talk about what happened last year, and that it ain't nothing new. Like, if y'all just getting on the bandwagon, then good for you. But this has been things that are going on. And when I talk about particularly the work with the Indianapolis Kwanzaa Committee, and the reason why Kwanzaa was actually created was because of people speaking up for themselves in Watts in California, and people creating something that could heal a community as well as uplift a community. And that's what the purpose of Kwanzaa is all about, is creating something that can actually bring some more purpose and things that people can grab onto within this community that have to live in a world that's not really for them. But again, we didn't miss a beat. We just kept it going. We just adjusted the way that we needed to, because our core purpose is to help people, you know, and that's just what it is.
I love that. So I'm Jess with Indie 10, Black Lives Matter, and Queering Indie. Queering Indie was started, I want to say, about 5 years ago, and it's really a grassroots organization that is focused on meeting the most immediate needs of the queer community in Indianapolis, making sure that we're also staying connected to social issues and viewing it through the lens of queerness as far as how things can impact it. You know, so you can take any of the crises that Indianapolis is facing right now, and if you view it through a queer lens, you can see that there's some disproportionate impact in communities who are also Black, who are also undocumented, and who are also connected to other efforts, and making sure that we either connect them with resources they need, or that they at least have a sense of community, so that they can find those resources themselves. And then Indie 10, of course, was started 7 years ago. 10 strangers went to Ferguson to provide street medic and, you know, just personal care to the protesters that were there. And then when they came back, you know, just kind of catapulted into what it is today. I think that a lot of people associate direct action with Indie 10, but we also have a lot of community initiatives that we're very proud of. We have the No Questions Asked Food Pantry, which has been operating for 2 years, in which we're still looking for a building for. So if you have a building for us to operate our food pantry, hit us up. We, you know, work closely with IUYA. We work with CLEOs. CLEOs, you know, was among the first during the unrest last year to notice that people in the community were acting out of a place of hurt and that other folks could be harmed potentially, and they opened up their doors. And that's not something that you hear of. So it really is a collective effort. So we have the food pantry, we do collective work with other groups. We have a really strong policy team that we're very proud of. So we make sure that we're keeping track of things that the city council is trying to introduce into policy, making sure that when they're adding money into the police budget, that they understand that their constituents aren't just, you know, faceless names on a tab somewhere that they can count on for a vote. You are accountable to the people who elected you into office, and we will continue to hold you accountable until you step down or perish from your own demise. We don't have nothing to do with that. We also have cop watch training and street medic training, because again, we wanted to make sure that the things that we had access to that kept people safe during the unrest and uprising, that other people would know how to self-empower and how to share those resources so that it's not all just focused on us. We appreciate, you know, the support, and we also want to make sure that we're sharing it out. I think something that's unique about us is that we operate outside of, you know, a nonprofit lens. So that allows us to be more creative and a little more bold in some of the things that we're doing. And it also allows us to establish some really deep roots with some of our community partners who are at a nonprofit and who can either give guidance or resources so that we can continue to teach people and to keep people safe. So we got a lot going on. The holidays are coming up. You know, we got some things coming up with the food pantry that we're really excited about. Cop watch and street medic training are due to resume, I think, in the spring when Indiana weather settles down a little more. But in the meantime, we're just continuing to build behind the scenes, continuing to watch policy, and continuing to just support people who are most in need as they've been impacted by the state.
Thank you all so much again for the incredible work that you're doing. You all mentioned some things that happened over the past year and a half, dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, dealing with the social unrest that was happening and everything. Does anyone want to speak to? Well, no, let's leave that one alone, because I feel like we've already dove into that. But Jess, you brought up a really important point about collaboration, mentioning the work that ND10 did with IUYA, also with Cleo's Bodega and other groups. I want to expound on that concept a little more because one of the criticisms that I hear when we talk about civic leadership and engagement is people saying, oh, there's too much working in silos. And there are examples of that. But one place that I've seen the opposite of that is in, grassroots work. So I want to have everybody kind of speak to the importance of collaboration when it comes to really serving the needs of the people.
Sure. It's essential to the work. You can't get work done if you don't have a presence or a relationship with other people. That was probably one of the things that kept me from like deeply engaging work before coronavirus came up, because I didn't want to be accountable to anybody. If you just flying off the handle on Facebook or showing up to rallies and shooting off at the mouth and showing up to a couple of events and giving a critical response every now and then, it's very easy to build a personal reputation and a personal brand, but there's no power in that, So the social capital that I carry is because Leah and Kyra established a foundation and established, intention and rigor to the things that they hold dearest to their heart. And then I brought that with, my own Pisces flair, and it allowed for things that I was already doing. I've worked in development, so I know how to raise money. I've been a community organizer since college, so I know what it takes to get people to operate out of rapid response. I understand, how to write grants and seek out resources and kind of circumnavigate the state if that's not something that people are interested in. I work in child protection services. I worked in shelters in a leadership role. So you're taking all of those things, you're taking all of the connections that you built up over your personal and professional career, and then you're marrying it with a group of people. And then being a part of a collective is necessary so that you have people to be accountable to. There was never a time, last year that we weren't checking in with the families. We weren't checking in with each other. We didn't make ourselves available to be accountable. And then making sure that people know, like, hey, we're not just here for direct action. If you have an event or something and you just want help amplifying, or you'd like us to just, show up and take a couple of pictures. Sibeko was really good at that. We was dead dog tired last year, so we couldn't make all of the invitations that he sent out, but he's good about, sending us something and being like, hey, we got a Kwanzaa celebration, would love for y'all to celebrate. Cleo's Bodega, when the mural was installed on Indiana Avenue, they actually closed to, the general public and allowed for the artists to come in for it to be a creative space. So they're flexible in that. IUYA and Cosecha, amazing. Could not imagine what movement space would look like without them. Always concerned about our self-care, always making sure, like, do y'all need anything? And then I think people tend to look at who might be the loudest in certain circles, and not even like vocally loud, but just present as far as the media is concerned. And they look at some of the things that we do and they're like, man, y'all are bold. And I'm like, y'all need to go look at our primas at IUYA, because they are throwing down. They had a whole action last year at the Clay County Jail. And they were protesting, expansions to the jail and making sure that people also understood how that fit into their narrative of everyone in Indiana needing licenses regardless of their citizenship status. And the boldness that they carry that forward with is something that we study and respect. So it absolutely is always a collective effort. It's never just one person. You might only see one person, but in order for you to see that one person with a, established narrative, it took 15 people to pour into that person that person is accountable to in order to communicate that.
Thank you, Jess. And yeah, I definitely want to piggyback on the support that we provide to each other, right? So it's finding those intersectionalities and the commonalities that we have within our groups is not only fundamental to being able to back each other up, but breaking those cycles like within our own communities. Anti-Blackness doesn't just exist here in America. It's something that exists back in my home country in Mexico. So like what roles do we play within our own communities to break these cycles that keep us separate? Like how do we incorporate those things so that so that the rest of our communities are also involved in, in other issues that don't pertain to just us. How do we continue to work in a way that's impactful and isn't reinventing the wheel because other groups have already done this and other groups have already done that? So how do we bring it all together and, and make it, a full circle, versus, having everyone in their own little bubble separately. So it's definitely been an amazing relationship that we've had with Indy 10, and especially last year, through all of the events, through the July 4th events, the uprisings in May, it's definitely, I think it's allowed our communities to take a broader look at, our own internal biases, our own internal racism, and, how do we continue to break those cycles and break those barriers.
Yeah, it's a way of community to be able to collaborate that, it seems to get lost somewhere within the society, and we have to bring it back. I look to one of the principles of Kwanzaa, Ujima, collective work and responsibility, where it talks about making your brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solving them together. That is a mentality that you have to have by coming from maybe a loving family, a loving community, and examples, in our society sometimes does not allow us to have that environment to where we think about that. And it's kind of get it how you can, get it from the mud and get it no matter what type of thing, instead of looking at how you can help others and knowing that will come back to you. Just understanding how that connects, what Jessica was talking about when Cleo's closed down, in order for us to honor the families and have artists there. That was an idea by a great community leader, Stacia Murphy. And her main point was to really give artists the opportunity after the pandemic to be able to get compensated because they weren't working, because things weren't being available for them to be able to work, and to have the most purest form of expression within our community, which is through our arts and through being able to have a microphone, and the families being able to get up and show their thanks and appreciation for what was going on, because they are a part of our community. No matter if you felt a certain type of way about what their family member did and how it happened, we lost members of our community, and that is the way that we express that loss. And that was a collaborative effort. In the same token, when we're in times of crises, collaborative efforts are a lot easier. Not only did Indigo and Midwest Food Bank and Gleaners come together, 913 Sports, I want to shout them out for delivering food all across this city to make sure that people had that, and there was institutions available like Flanner House and Cleo's and Martin Luther King Center and Crystal Moore House and La Plaza, who definitely made sure that people got the food. Why did it take something like a pandemic for that type of collaboration to happen? And now what we're looking at, as I'm on some of these boards and some of these committees of food, is that, there's a real problem with people getting food, but it's not because we have a lack of food, it's the access. And it took a pandemic for us to actually study some of these things, and everybody to kind of look at, wow, we're all in the same boat here in a pandemic. And then we take a second look like, whoa, hold on. There's people who actually have to deal with this on an everyday basis outside of a pandemic. What's going on for real? You don't get that perspective if you're not open to a collaborative effort and mindset in terms of listening to the stories that people have been knocking on your door, banging on your window, telling you this day after day after day, and you're ignoring them. But now that you have some time to sit down and you're working from home or you're chilling out and you're seeing something in your face or through somebody's video that, everybody got on the bandwagon when it came to equity last year because everybody felt sorry for George Floyd. But how many George Floyds were there before that happened? What happened with Rodney King? What happened with Trayvon Martin? You can go all the way back to the fact that Watts was rioting back in '68 and established Kwanzaa. Yeah, I'm gonna go back to it because this thing has happened so many times. And I can just imagine people who are enslaved talking about this isn't right, and you had abolitionists trying to talk about how that wasn't right, and then there's all of a sudden somebody found out, this isn't right. So how long have we actually been dealing with this in this country, and how long do we have to deal with this in this country when it comes to these things? Yes, collaborate. Make sure that you connect with your next door neighbor. Make sure you connect with your community, and make sure you connect with people who are like-minded so that we can deal with all the craziness that we have to work with. And we're sick of doing it on our own, but we don't want to work with people who don't understand the mission of what we're doing. So if you're not listening to us, that's the first part of collaborating, is making sure you sit down and listen to the mission and what's going on. If you're not willing to do that and you have your own agenda, then that's why we have all these individuals doing things by themselves. Stop, Jessica.
Listen, I was pausing just in case you want to come off. Go ahead.
No, I don't. We're not gonna name names today. I'm gonna keep it very cute because I got a couple of things that I need to work on too. And that's also a part of collaborating, is understanding, like, I used to operate out of the understanding, like, if it can be destroyed by the truth, it deserves to be destroyed by the truth. But I think that when I started getting into, like, restorative and transformative justice, understanding how individual responsibility is influenced by a collective responsibility, and how when we step away from calling people in and helping transform harm and helping to mitigate harm, we leave it up to the state and we leave it up to institutions and systems of oppression to do it for us. And that's why we have overcrowded jails. That's why they're being able to build a new justice center when that money needs to go towards the housing and food crisis in Indianapolis. That's why they continue to give the money to the police instead of saying, oh, we've dumped hundreds of millions of dollars into this pot, and we see year after year that it's not improving, that our officers are actually not culturally or emotionally competent, that we're not concerned about the communities that they're, attempting to hyper surveil. And instead of us getting to the root of the problem, which is what transformative justice does, we're just going to be reactive. So it takes time to step out of being in a reactive place and knowing when being reactive can be a part of a strategy and when you're just allowing for your ego to drive forward what's a natural instinct for you. And that's also a part of being in community. I would not have guessed that I would be accountable to so many people. 0 out of 10 do not recommend. I think one of the things that I can use as an example was when the mural was set to be installed last year, there was some misunderstandings about who's responsible for it and how it was being paid for. The city didn't have anything to do with paying for the mural. We had private and community donors who donated for the artist to be able to be compensated for doing that work. There was a petition that was circulated, which was fine, but I don't know that, especially me with everything that was going on, I know I didn't take time to try to understand the level of uncertainty that people were expressing at that time, But when you're accountable to community, you do have to be open to be critiqued. You do have to be willing to hear people when they say, I know that 98% of the time, you're right, you're focused, you have, a controlled narrative, but that you might have missed this because this isn't something that you are actively, presently, and daily connected to. So being a part of a collective and being in community means, not just that you're borrowing on public pressure for things that you want to get pushed forward, but also that you're listening to people so that they can trust that when you present information to the public, that they themselves understand the process that went into it, so that it doesn't just look like you're just like, oh, well, I'm tall with a big voice and can't nobody run me over, so what's up? Because it's very easy to do that. It's very easy to do that, and I have done that in some instances. But that connectivity can make or break you. And if you're not willing to be accountable to people and to really wrestle with what it means to be in community with others, then this work will pull it out of you, and it might be one tooth at a time, or it might be your full set.
Wow, so many gems there for us to reflect on when it comes to operating with a level of intentionality and integrity in community. Because when I look at our city and the potential that it has to be one of the most equitable places in the country, like, I keep saying that because I'm like, hopefully, like Sibeko was saying earlier, hopefully somebody will listen eventually and we'll all get on the same page. But to just hear the thought process that goes into all of these conversations, the personal growth that's involved in really, becoming that leader, I just think it's beautiful. So thank you both for sharing so much. Sayra, I'm going to come to you to get us started off with this one. But Sibeko mentioned earlier that before last year, there are, hundreds of years that we could look at of injustice, of things that have gone wrong in this country, systems being set up to where everyone isn't able to really rise and to live a fruitful life. Where do you think we go from here in terms of building back better? Because I feel like so many people are thinking about, well, what's next? What do we do after we finally get rid of COVID or whatever that looks like? I don't think that's even a thing, but so many people are really focused on like, what do we do next? What are your thoughts on how we really capitalize off this moment and build something better in the future that works for the collective instead of just for the few?
Yeah. So cosecha has a saying, and it's called I'm gonna try to translate it, see if it translates properly. Like,
you can do both, honestly. You can do the Spanish and the English, yes.
El pueblo cuida al pueblo, which is the people take care of the people, like, they take care of them. And that has been seen, like, immensely during COVID. Like having, like having to, like have the fundraising to be able to provide for, like financially, like for like economically for other undocumented families, because the government wasn't willing to step up and, help them as well, like, and, like, I think more than ever now through COVID, like it's seen how much like other organizations, like Flanner House with Indy 10, and how other people have stepped up to take care of the people. Like the people will take care of its own, and the people will provide for the people. And I think, like you mentioned, Sibeko, like we have to take our brothers and sisters' issues and make them our own. And that's also something that Cosecha also runs with a lot too, is, like Cosecha has circles, nationally and through the state. So, you have like, for example, your Indianapolis circle, and you have your circle up in Elkhart, and then down in Bloomington. And each circle is only as strong as the rest of the circles. So, if you apply that to like our different organizations and our communities, like we're only as strong as the rest of us. So if we're not uplifting each other and working in unity, like we're a hot mess. Like we're not like we're not gonna really, we're not progressing together, and we're gonna continue, like to navigate individually if we're not watching out for each other, if we're not making sure that these collaborations that we have are intentional, if we're not putting the people that are directly impacted at the forefront. Because a lot of organizations, like have good intentions, but they're being led by people that are not directly impacted. So what, like how do you serve the people if people are not leading? Like how do you serve a group of people that isn't you, like, but like how, and it's a part of that also accountability that Jess was talking about, like who holds you accountable? If no one's holding you accountable, how do we know like what's being done is what the people want? So like who holds you accountable? And I think that's something that we've worked a lot through, like especially like with Indy 10 and Surge, and other community organizations, like like we hold each other accountable, like how do we move forward in a way that we continue to give the power back to the people. How do we make that intentional? If the people aren't in power that are directly impacted, like who are we serving then? What is the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish?
So was the question what's next?
Go ahead.
Was the question like what's next?
What's next? How do we build back better?
Keep that same energy that you bring in right now, because it's not gonna, you still need it. You know, we haven't fixed anything. We haven't repaired anything. The companies that are wanting to give and make things more equitable might need to have a plan, just like donors have a giving plan, an equity plan for companies and corporations who have made these statements. You need to keep on, and it's not a handout. You know, and if you think about it like that, then you go back and do some type of understanding about why. This is all about helping and making sure that things are put in place in the infrastructure of our country and the infrastructure of our system that has been proven not to be for a lot of people who are in the majority of the people that are in this country. This system is not for. So all of the things that you're doing now in response and reaction to the things that that pulled your heartstring last year and this year during the pandemic and the people speaking up for themselves, as I would refer to it. Keep it up. You know, it's not going to stop. So you shouldn't stop. And I believe, particularly as a corporation, that you can find a reason to give to things that you want to, and this will be it. We have a lot of opportunities that have opened up, particularly for Black women in these corporations when it comes to diversity and equity and what that means. So let's not get rid of those positions because you don't see somebody breaking a window downtown. You know, what exactly can that position do to enhance your corporation in the long run, and treating the people who are in those positions as leaders and being able to take your company to another level. And for my brothers and sisters in our community, we need to basically understand that we got us. We are all that we actually need. And if we have to deal with things like mental health and trauma, then we have to deal with them. If we have to deal with things like trying to pay rent, you know, next week because it's the first of the month, then we have to deal with them. But what we have to stop doing is reacting to the way that this system has caused us to react to each other. We have to come together and create our own way of being in our own community and the rules and regulations that go. And I'm not talking about the street code and things like that, because that is a copycat of how this system has actually treated us. I'm talking about something that's organic, that's going to save lives, that's going to benefit others, and where our children can actually grow in a place to where they can thrive and be better than what we are. And so that is a challenge to my community, to help us, those who are in the streets doing things that are good. Like it feels good to do things that helps people. But we also need those things to circle back around to us so that we can have the strength and energy to do it on a regular basis. And if you only have the strength and energy to do it on a part-time basis, we're not asking for you to do it full-time. We are asking, though, that we change the mindset and make sure that we don't counteract anything that's going on that is moving our community forward to get off of the way that we have this, you know, this way of just going against each other, you know, and slowing us down on that. Like, we have more control than we think when it comes to how we deal with things. And I'm not talking about pulling yourself up from your bootstraps or nothing like that. I don't care. I'm talking about if you ain't got boots, look at your neighbor and say, hey, can you help me to make some boots? Or, you know what? Hey, can we create a road where we don't need boots? Like, let's talk. Let's have these conversations, and let's make sure we do the work that our children will be proud of and that they can build upon.
Not Sibeko preaching. Okay. Not bad. Sayra had, you know, the pre-sermonic song. I love it.
You gonna give us the altar call, Jess?
And am not. Please don't give me. You know, I was on track to be a commissioned minister. That probably saved a lot of people that I wasn't. Amen. We will. But I think it definitely comes back to like accountability for me. You know, James Baldwin continues to remind us, if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. So making sure that if we have friends that are in these organizations, that we're talking to them about what systemic harm looks like and what their role in that organization is and what it could be transformed to be. And making sure that we don't wrap up all of our power in these institutions who are ultimately navigated by metrics that they've promised to donors. You know what I mean? I think that institutions have a role, and I think that something that we might appreciate, you know, working at a grassroots level is being able to speak candidly with those institutions, you know? So being able to sit down with people and being like, you gave me a resource, but this resource didn't work, and here's why. Now, instead of me just saying, you know, that didn't work and pouting, we're also taking it a step further and saying, you gave me this resource. This resource didn't work because of this. Here's the work that you need to do before you can come back and ask for an authentic collaboration with our group so that we can make sure that we're principled in how we move forward. We had a group that approached us and wanted to help us find a space for the food pantry. So we went and we viewed the space. The space was perfect. It was on the far east side. There was funding available so that we wouldn't have to pull from limited funding and, you know, donors who have been generously supporting us for years. So everything was there, but that resource was not ready to move forward with a Black leftist radical grassroots organization. So we went back to the people who established that resource for us and we said, hey, we understand the intent, but now that this has happened and we notice that people are weaponizing their white stagnancy to keep people of color, specifically Black people who are housed in that neighborhood historically and presently, you now have an obligation because you say you want to be in partnership with us to go to these people and to say, you know what, we thought the trainings were enough, but we realized we're not following up with the trainings. Or we sent you DEI people, but maybe we need to make sure that the DEI people also come with accountability partners and with a call to action. That's something also that Indianapolis struggles and wrestles with. I did DEI a while ago, back before, you know, it was popping to say that you were a DEI facilitator and working on equity and justice. I was at the little community conversations. That's how a lot of people knew me prior to me transitioning into Indy 10. But what's most troubling is a lot of these organizations are wanting to establish equity or even have a forward-facing DEI facilitator, but it's not a person of color. It's not a marginalized person. If it is, the marginalization is something that, you know, they only lean on when they're doing DEI work and it's not evident in their everyday life, you know? So if you have a DEI facilitator who, you know, is in a gentrified area of Indianapolis and they got their home because 17,000 Black families were pushed out, how are they actively wrestling with their participation in a system to meet their basic needs? And how is that translating into the work that they do? So really encouraging people to dig deeper and to shift from, you know, not necessarily an individual's responsibility, but a collective responsibility. We're all participating in these systems in one way or another. I'm on an Apple product right now. I got AirPods in my ear. So I'm not exempt from, you know, being complicit in some ways, in the ways that capitalism shows up in our community. But what I'm committed to is to do a daily examination of how my complicitness might either help me harm or help others, and being committed to being with other people, my ego, or even to have the resources and the spirit to say, well, when someone met me with critique, my response to them wasn't a communal response and it was my ego responding. How can I, you know, make emotional restitution with that person, not necessarily so that I can pull on their social capital at a later time, but so that they can understand that when I say I'm an abolitionist, what I mean is that I'm not going to cancel us. And short of you committing an act of extreme harm against my body or the body of someone that I love, you're still a part of my community. That doesn't mean I have to actively pull up and bring you soup when you're sick. It means that I won't help the state disappear you based on the harm that you've done, but I'm also going to hold the people who are closest to you accountable. You don't necessarily have personal, direct, intimate access to me, but I'm not committed to canceling you because I understand how these institutions and these systems are set up to disproportionately target undocumented people, Black men, queer femmes, you know? So really aggressively encouraging people to deeply examine their participation and their roles in whatever role it is that they serve, whether it's a personal, professional, or a communal one, and nudging them. Charlene Carruthers wrote a book, and the beginning of the book always just captures me, because the dedication, she says, this is for Harriet, who had her gun pressed to my back. How can we graduate from the egos that we currently have and building our personal brands and building our own social capital for whatever reason, so that it's a shared responsibility? That takes weight and burden off of us. It also empowers other people. It helps us to be more vulnerable and deliberate with each other. And in that, yes, we can transform some of this intracommunal or systemic violence that we're seeing. But it's not going to happen until we're able to have an authentic relationship with ourselves and to say, okay, that was my ego. This didn't serve nobody but me. And to move that forward, instead of being like, okay, I was nominated for a community award, but, because that's something too. I was nominated for a community award and I had to decline it because the people who were hosting the banquet, it was a bank, and that bank has a historic and present history of declining people of color for mortgages. So what would it look like if Jessica Louise, showed up at a club that not a lot of Black or brown people are welcome at and accepted a community award, knowing that there's a housing crisis going on and that this bank is complicit in that housing crisis? So really negotiating and wrestling with ourselves and saying, yes, I could be exalted for this and I could welcome this, but who's going to be harmed or helped because of it?
Again, I cannot say thank you enough to each of you for this conversation. Just shedding light on so many things. One, the incredible work that each of you are doing in the community, but also what it really truly means to be an active leader that is operating in intentionality, integrity, and collaboration. So again, thank you all. As we wrap up, I just want everybody to share. We had a comment come in from Beth earlier, Beth from Leadership Indianapolis, and she wanted to know what helps to keep you resilient. So if you would like to share that, or any other lesson that helps guide your journey as a leader, and whoever wants to jump in first and share that.
I would say that my mindset is not on ending anything. It would be great to say that something ended, but that's not my mindset. What I am trying to do is make things better for the youth that are coming, behind me, as well as those who haven't been here before. So that's a never-ending journey. That's something that you don't stop to do. And so I don't think there's a finish line or a goal in terms of when it's time to say, it's time to, it's over. I just have that mindset that there's always going to be something to do. And that helps me to pace myself. That helps me to take breaks when I need to. It helps me to watch some anime when I need to, or read my comic books. I don't, I'm not ashamed to take that time to do those things, because I'm going to be in this for a lifetime. It's probably going to happen for me to where I'm working in some capacity like this in community and connectivity throughout my whole life. And it will wear you out. You will get tired, and you have to build your endurance for it. But you don't have to sacrifice your whole self for it. Some sacrifice will happen, and it's there. But you have to check yourself on how much you can give and when you need to step back. And that's the probably one of the most important aspects of community and connecting, making your brothers and sisters' problems our problems, is that it's not just all on you, and that you have that room and that space to step back, because there are others who are working with you, and you have others that are together with you, to where you have that space. And because of what we're dealing with trauma and mental illness, we have not been doing a very good job of that. But Sibeko gonna chill out every time that he need to chill out, and then I'm gonna come on back and give y'all a little fire, when need be. And then I'm gonna step on back. It is what it is. So that's how I do it. So.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of inner work to acknowledge, when you need to take some time, when you need, when you need rest. Because if your glass is empty or half full, there isn't anything left for you to give your community. You need to replenish your joy, your rest, in order for you to continue to work. And it also helps to have, those people that keep you accountable in those regards too, like having people, that allow you to feel confident in stepping back and taking time. Because I used to find myself in a place where I felt I felt really guilty if I was just at home, like painting or just coloring, or doing something small that wasn't, in my mind, productive, right? But although maybe it wasn't helping anyone, it was helping me. So like, how do we get to a place where we're allowed, where we can allow ourselves to do that, um, joyfully, and doing it in a way that, like, we can give ourselves that time. And that comes with, like, having other people in the journey alongside. Like, so who helps you, and who guides, who do you have alongside you that helps you do that? And for me, a lot of times, when I feel a little sluggish, I look at the other great people around me that are doing amazing work. Like, I feel a lot of times, I can get a little bit narrow-sighted, and you lose sight of the bigger picture and be like, this thing isn't working. Like, and it all feels like it's failing because this one little thing here isn't working. Like, but the bigger picture's moving along. Like, keeping those avenues open, relationships with people that can allow you to have that space, I think, is really important. Like, finding things that bring you joy, and finding time to actually allow yourself to do those things.
I've had to pivot my acceptance of being resilient to recognizing that I'm human. I actually don't want to be resilient. I need to feel the impact of things, not necessarily in solidarity with people that I'm working alongside or am attempting to amplify the harm that they've experienced either at the hands of their neighbors or the state, but so that I'm not driven by my ego. So I remember, like, when everything popped off, I was like Audre Lorde. I was like, I am deliberate and afraid of nothing, and making sure that my public presentation of Jess, because I'm not Jessica Louise. Like, y'all done turned Jessica Louise into something that it was not supposed to be. It's not just a name. I'm not a personality. I'm not, I'm a regular AFF person. I had to stop myself from cussing Ebony because I know you at work. But I'm a regular person who just has very strong opinions and convictions and isn't afraid to back down from those things, regardless of what it might mean for me personally. But I remember after I attended an organizer training just to help me be more structured and focused in some of the strategies and initiatives that we're wanting to move forward with, I actually discovered that I don't want to be afraid of nothing. I think that fear can serve you and that it can keep you humble in a way that you need to, because your ego will shut you off from your senses. And your senses are given to you, by the ancestors and the elders to help keep you and others safe. So I pivoted from I am deliberate and afraid of nothing to I am committed to being a deliberate and vulnerable organizer. So when you see that people are looking to you for a narrative or for modeling something or to carry something forward, what is it that you want to be known for? If I want my communities to be steeped in, actual personal peace, then I have to model some of that vulnerability for myself. And I have to understand that I don't have to take every assignment. I don't have to take every news interview. I don't have to be the one to move things forward because it's impacting my ability to rest. It's impacting my ability to be authentic and to speak with integrity when I implore people to rest. It helps me to establish better boundaries. It helps me to, continue to move in a way that feels good for me and helps me to be consistent with who I say I am and who I want to be. So I definitely encourage people to wrestle with what resilience means for you. And then to also be vulnerable and be like, look, I know that you look at me like a powerhouse, but I actually need help with housing. I actually need help with mental health resources. When we put out this call, it was actually because, I was wrestling with some things and I wasn't ready to share it with others. So making sure that you're not just operating from a political standpoint, and yes, the personal is political, but also making sure that people see you as a person, because when they don't, then they try to assign things to you that you're not prepared or willing to pick up, but that you feel obligated to pick up because of your role in community, and reflecting it back on them and holding up that mirror and saying, I hear you say resilience, but I'm receiving it as this. And I'm actually wanting to pivot out of that role so that I can have a more strategic, long-term focused role in the community, and that it's not just reactive and viral videos outside the chief of police's house and, national interviews and awards and stuff like that, because that's not going to get people free. I could have an award at my house, and it's no diss to anybody who accepts awards. Please do, because we need our flowers. So get your flowers however you can. But I think ultimately, I want to rest, and I want people to be at rest. One thing that I consider myself now to be is like a healer and a peacekeeper, but I do that with intention. It's intention and rigor. So in order for me to keep the peace, it means that I have to step into certain spaces so that the people who don't have the social capital and who have something to lose don't have to show up and lose their jobs that they use to feed their families and their kids, and be willing to be arrested and be willing to go to jail and be willing to stick up and be like, no, y'all actually got a lot of people messed up and it's not okay. And because they're not here to say it and they've given me that charge, I'm gonna carry it forward. But then also taking it back to those people and being like, even though you're not ready for a public facing thing, we need you here. We might need you to do restorative practices in your children's school. We might need you to come volunteer at the pantry. We might need you to participate in a self-care day. And then making sure that becomes a focus as opposed to being resilient. Because it's very easy to pick up the knapsack of resiliency and to carry it forward. But then when you burnt out and people still want things from you, you're like, well, dang, now I can't disappoint anybody. I can't say no now, and then you're not operating out of a place of intention or rigor or integrity. You're acting out of, emotional manipulation and obligation. And there's no room for that if we want people to be liberated from the things that have held us captive for so long.
Oof. Again, beautiful conversation, you all. Thank you again to Sebaco Jawanza, Director of Food Justice for the Flanner House, Sayra Campos of Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance, and Jessica Louise of Indy 10 Black Lives Matter, Queering Indy, Louisville Bail Fund, all the things. Thank you all so much for this wonderful convo. Thank you to each and every person that tuned in this afternoon. We will have another convo next Tuesday, again from 12:15 until about 1-ish, where we'll be talking with leaders in education. So we will hear from Ebony Crow, who is with MSD of Warren Township. We'll also hear from Gregory Slambrook of Brebeuf Jesuit, and one other person as well, whose name is escaping my mind because this is real life. I'm sorry, I don't have that memorized right now. But I will post that information on our social media pages for you all to stay tuned to. You can also find out more information about Leadership Indianapolis on our website, leadershipindianapolis.com. Thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon and a positive week.